What are some other risks? Let's say it's not. Let's move away from the lots and stuff. But let's say it's a house or some other type of property. What are some of the risks that you see?
Yeah. So obviously, condition of the house is a huge risk. There can be environmental concerns. I had 1 year where I bought 4 acres in Madison County, and the survey came back as being 7 acres. In the same year, I bought 30 acres in Marion County, and the survey came back as being 27 acres. There can be a big discrepancy in what you thought you bought.
Yeah.
And if you had bought it in a normal transaction where you had a real estate agent and you had surveys and you had title work, you would have found this out before you bought it. But because you're buying at this auction, you're not doing all that due diligence from the point of view of no title work, no home inspection, no survey. And so you're taking risks that there's going to be a problem with all those areas. Basically, every step of due diligence you would find in a normal transaction, you're not getting that.
Right.
And so whatever those risks are that you're trying to avoid, that's the risk that you'd be potentially facing.
Okay. Thanks for joining us on another REI-NWA podcast. This is episode number 63, and it's that time of year. The Arkansas tax deed auction is coming up, and so that is what we're going to be covering in this episode. As always, my name is Colley Bailey. I'm the principal broker here at Lone Rock Realty, and in studio, I have our good friend Paul Younger.
Great to be here again.
TWS Title. Yeah, man, glad to have you back in the studio and back talking again about the tax deed auction. Our previous episode on that, I think it's episode 35, something like that. It was a year ago. So go check that one out. A lot of good information in there. We're probably going to have a Venn diagram for these episodes because we're going to talk about a few of the same things, I'm sure. But we'll try to take a few things in some different directions. But let's start out with, what is a tax deed auction? And why are we different than Texas here in Arkansas?
Yeah. So in the state of Arkansas, in late summer, in July, August, and September, the Commissioner of State Lands conducts auctions in each county, one auction per year in each county. And they are selling the properties that are tax delinquent. And so you're buying the actual property. You're not buying a tax lien.
Okay.
You're buying the property itself. And what makes us a little bit unique compared to other states, especially Texas, is that all sales are final. So when you buy it at that auction, you have to write a check before you leave, and you've bought it. There's no redemption period for the delinquent taxpayer at the point that it is auctioned. They've had the previous 4 or 5 years to pay their taxes, and at the day of the auction, it's too late to redeem it.
Okay.
And that makes us a little bit different than other states.
So that's what a lien state does, is they give them a redemption period, right?
Well, there's tax lien states, there's tax deed states, and then there's redeemable deed states. And so I think Texas would fall into the category of a redeemable deed.
Oh, okay.
But in Arkansas, all sales are final at the day of the auction.
Okay. Perfect. Tax deed, not tax lien.
Correct.
Not redeemable tax deed.
Correct. A tax lien is simply you're buying the essentially a judgment against the taxpayer. So you're paying the county for their taxes, and then you now have that lien against the property for the back due taxes.
Okay.
There's a lot of other states that do that, but in this state, we just
usually
property outright.
How that resolves itself is that taxpayer now owes you the taxes plus interest.
Correct. If you're in a lien state, you're buying the debt, and then they owe you that money. And if they fail to pay you, then you can take action to foreclose on your lien after a certain period of time.
Okay. And so we don't have to, I don't want to go too deep into Texas. I mean, I love all of our, Texas edition F-150s driving around Fayetteville from all of our awesome U of A Texas scholars that come up here. But so there, what happens is that it's still a deed, okay, but in order for them it's redeemable, so they could get the deed back, but they have to pay you the money that you paid back plus what it is.
In Texas, they would have to, the delinquent taxpayer could still redeem the property after the auction if they paid the back due taxes plus an interest to you, the buyer.
Yeah.
So those sales are not final. So there's a lot of money to be earned from the interest on that potentially, but you would not be able to do anything with the property until the redemption period runs.
Right. Okay.
Whereas here, on the day of the auction, you're buying the property. And so you are the new owner of the property when that auction ends.
Okay. So what are the difficulties? And we did talk about this in the last episode, but what are some of the difficulties here in Arkansas? So you bought you got the property, you have the rights to the property, but you have to quiet the title. What is that?
Yeah. So before you're able to buy title insurance, you have to do a quiet title lawsuit to remove the interest of the former owners. We can also fix other title problems while we're doing that, but the primary reason on a tax sale is you have to remove the interest of these former owners. And kind of a little backstory, if you can't buy title insurance, then you cannot borrow money against the property.
Okay.
And so that's really where the rubber meets the road, is that, even if your buyer is willing to accept the fact that you only have a tax deed and not a warranty deed, the bank isn't going to lend the money for the buyer to buy the property. And so, yes, you could do a quitclaim deed to transfer ownership to someone else, but you're not going to be able to sell it in a normal commercial transaction with a real estate agent and a title company and a lender unless you do the quiet title.
Okay, perfect.
And so what we try and do is we want to fix that defect so that you can sell the property for top dollar without an exception or a disclosure about, well, yeah, I own the property, but there's this issue with the title, right? So we fix that problem. So when you sell the property, the same as if you had done a rehab on a property, you want to fix all the problems so you can get the top dollar for that property. And that's what we do on the title side.
Okay. So all that extra title work, and look, every time you buy property, you should be going through a title company. So like you're going to have title fees no matter how you buy a property. You should always be calculating that in. But for this particular job for the title company, what is it, like $2,500, $3,000? What should people be putting aside for that?
Yeah, so it's approximately $2,500 in legal fees and expenses to do the quiet title part.
Okay.
And then when you do sell the property after that, you have the normal closing costs and fees.
Right.
The cost can vary depending upon how many properties you have in each county. The more properties you have in one county, the cheaper the price per parcel gets.
Oh, okay.
Doing one at a time, though, is pretty expensive, and it runs about $2,500 to $3,000, depending upon the county, how long the legal description is, how many parties are involved. So we don't really know what the exact cost will be until we get into it.
Okay.
But it's about $2,500.
Okay.
And it takes 4 to 6 months.
Right.
So that's kind of the bigger rub, is that there's going to be a 4 to 6 month delay between when you buy the property at auction to when you can close on the resale of the property.
Okay. Is there anything to keep you, let's say it's a property that needs some work, you're going to flip it or you're going to get it ready for rental, or is there any problem going ahead and getting started with any of that stuff during that time?
Yeah, that's a great question. And one that comes up a lot. What I typically recommend is don't invest any money into the property until we're done with the quiet title. The reason is if there was a problem with the sale and the commissioner overturns the sale, you'll get your purchase money back. So you'll be made whole on the purchase. You'll be out your legal fees and expenses of the quiet title lawsuit. But any money you've invested in the property is going to be lost because the former owner is going to get the property back and you're just going to get your purchase money back. So I always advise, don't do anything to the property that's going to cost money until we're done. That said, so kind of the example I always use is, if the roof leaks, go fix the roof to prevent further damage to the house, but don't replace the roof.
Right.
So, stop the damage that's occurring, but don't do anything else.
Okay. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. So let's say somebody wants to go to the tax auction and they're trying to figure out, well, how much liquid cash do I need available to even get into this game? Like what do you think they should prepare for there?
Well, the more the better. It is a cash auction. So at the end of the auction, before you leave the room, you have to write a check for what you just purchased.
Okay.
So you're not able to do any sort of financing or anything like that. You are expected to write a personal check for the amount of the property that you purchased at that time.
Okay. So we're going to talk about the lower limit. What about an upper limit? Is there any upper limit?
There is no upper limit. Every year there's a couple of people in Little Rock who will spend $4 or $5 million in one day at the Pulaski County auction.
Wow. Okay.
I think the most expensive property we had last year was a lake house that went for like $800,000. But that's kind of the exception.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff is on the lower end. Around this area, you have probably dealt with properties that were sold at a tax auction if you've ever bought a Bella Vista lot. A lot of those have gone for back due taxes, some of them repeatedly.
Mm-hmm.
In the past, they were very cheap. Right now, a Bella Vista lot is going to cost you about probably $8,000 or $9,000 at the auction.
Okay.
Depending upon what it is, they may go for more or less, but that's about the lowest end property you're going to find in this area. If you go in more rural areas, there may be land that's slightly cheaper, maybe a couple $1,000s an acre or something like that. If you go out in some rural areas, there are some other neighborhoods that were developed by Bella Vista, the same builders, Cooper Communities, that have not developed yet. And so it's like Cherokee Village, Hot Springs Village, and a couple others. If you see those properties, a lot of times those will sell for the minimum, which will be about $200. But they're pretty much worthless, so it's hard to make any money on those. So you can buy property for as cheap as $200, which is about the minimum of back due taxes. It just, unless you've got a really good plan on what you're doing with them, it's usually not advised because, it's an auction. And if nobody else wants to pay more than $200 for it, it's probably not worth anything. Right.
Okay.
So be wary on the low end ones.
And I mean, $200 to buy a lot, you're like, oh, well, that's amazing. But remember, you got to pay $2,500 to quiet the title and all that. And so by the time all that's done, somebody could have just gone and bought a lot from somebody who was current on those taxes for like $1,000.
Exactly.
So why would they spend that much on yours?
Exactly.
Okay.
That's exactly the problem. And they have restrictions on them that would prevent you from doing things like putting a mobile home on it.
Okay.
And so that's also brings down the value because there's just so many available.
What if you just want to go camp on it?
They would most definitely not let you camp on it.
No?
No.
You couldn't just buy and legally own a lot and go out and camp with your kids?
Not if it's in a restricted,
once a year?
A covenant restricted area like Bella Vista or Hot Springs Village. They will most definitely not allow you to do that.
Wow. Yes. Okay. All right. So just avoid those like the plague.
If you've got a great plan for what to do with them, it could be an opportunity. If I was a home builder in Hot Springs, I would buy up a bunch of Hot Springs Village lots and build houses.
Okay.
But I'm not. So trying to resell
them. If you buy a lot of them at a time, would some of that title work you have some kind of a bulk discount or something that might start to make sense?
Yeah. The legal fees go down and the out-of-pocket expenses go down. 1 year we did 34 Hot Springs Village lots and it got down to $1,000 a piece.
Okay.
But you're still talking about they'd spend $34,000 on doing the quiet titles for 34 lots. If you were a builder, you could go build a house on it and maybe sell it. If you're trying to sell it to another investor who's going to build the house, like you just said, why would I buy yours for $5,000 or $10,000 when there's 500 other people who are selling them for $1,000?
Yeah. Now, do you get to do any perk tests or anything like inspections on any of these, or how does that work?
No. That's probably the chief risk in my opinion, is you're buying it with whatever you can see from the street is what you're going to know about the property. Technically, you're not supposed to trespass on these properties. If it's an empty Bella Vista lot or something like that, obviously no one's really going to probably say anything to you if you go walk the lot. But you're not getting a perk test. You're not able to go inside any structures. So you're buying it basically sight unseen, except for what you can see from the road.
Okay.
And so there's a ton of risk in that you can buy. It has happened to me. I've bought one that did not pass a perk test. And then you're stuck with that.
Yeah. Okay. What are some other risks? Let's say it's not, let's move away from the lots and stuff, but let's say it's a house or, some other type of property. What are some of the risks that you see?
Yeah. So, obviously condition of the house is a huge risk. There can be, environmental concerns. So this is something that's happened to me. I bought one that had a mobile home that burned down. And the person who had lived in the mobile home had just been dumping his trash out there behind the mobile home for many years. And so when we tried to sell it, the buyers informed us, hey, there's a bunch of trash behind this burned down mobile home. What do you know about that? And of course we didn't.
Yeah.
We'd never been to the property. We'd never been on it. Right.
Yeah.
And so that, obviously hurts the resale because now you've got to clean up this mess.
Right.
So you've got that. You've got a lot of times there's issues with what you think the property is because the assessor has put a map up of what the property is supposed to be. But a lot of times the legal description that they sold to you doesn't match that map completely. Maybe slightly different shapes or maybe a few less acres than you thought it was. And this is just due to, especially in rural counties, older technology was not as accurate and sometimes mistakes were just made.
Yeah.
And so a lot of times probably the biggest issue we're having to deal with is figuring out what is the correct legal description for this rural property. And, a lot of times it doesn't match. I had one year where,
So there's conflicting surveys.
I had one year where I bought 4 acres in Madison County, and the survey came back as being 7 acres. In the same year, I bought 30 acres in Marion County, and the survey came back as being 27 acres. So it kind of balanced out for me in that year, but you can see there can be a big discrepancy in what you thought you bought.
Yeah.
And if you had bought it in a normal transaction where you had a real estate agent and you had surveys and you had title work, you would have found this out before you bought it. But because you're buying at this auction, you're not doing all that due diligence from the point of view of no title work, no home inspection, no survey. And so you're taking risks that there's going to be a problem with all those areas. Basically, every step of due diligence you would find in a normal transaction, you're not getting that.
Right.
And so whatever those risks are that you're trying to avoid, that's the risk that you'd be potentially facing.
Okay. Yeah. All those sections in the real estate contract, the termite and the lead-based paint and the surveys and the inspections and all that. So appraisals, all that stuff.
Yes.
So, okay.
Yeah. You never know. I bought one year that, when I went out to the property, I realized a tree had fallen on the back of the house that you couldn't see from the road.
Oh man.
But after I bought it and I went on the property, I could see that the tree had fallen on the house.
Yeah.
So you never know what you're going to run into, but it's a lot of fun. And the reward is worth the risk.
Yeah.
One thing that people, I think, maybe underappreciate is that the risk is what makes this profitable.
Okay.
If you were just buying this property.
Well, it's like any investment.
Any
right?
investment.
Yep.
Risk equals reward. And, if you're careful about it and you do your due diligence and you investigate as much as you can do really well.
Mm-hmm.
But, you can also lose a lot of money because it is risky.
Yep.
And if it were easier, then people would just pay the market price. If you got clean title and you had inspections and you could go into the house before you bought it and all those things, well, then people would just be paying the market price and it wouldn't be a profitable endeavor.
Makes sense. Well, all right. That's, we've covered a lot in this episode, and I know we have a whole other episode for people to go and check out as well. So with that, I just want to encourage people to come out to our main meeting for the month of June 2025. It's going to be on June 10th at the Hyatt House in Rogers. Doors are going to open at 5:30. We'll mix and mingle and get to build your network. It's one of the best things about REI-NWA. And we'll get started at 6 talking about the Arkansas tax deed auction with Paul. Is anybody else going to be there?
Yeah, I believe Lisa Pelton from the Commissioner of State Lands office will be there to cover how the auction works and what they do on the front end.
All right, fantastic. So you definitely do not want to miss this. Come on out to our main meeting. We'll see you then, and we'll catch you on the next episode of REI-NWA Podcast. Thanks for coming in, man.
It's a pleasure as always.
Yes, absolutely.